2021 is coming to an end. This channel is not doing particularly well. So I sat down and wanted to think of a video topic that called back to the origins of this channel. So let's get to it. The popularity of Xeons in gaming PCs has admittedly declined. The release of Ryzen as a value competitor to Intel that also has more cores has contributed to this decline, of course. But you will still see Xeons pop up in interesting builds, be that in gaming or otherwise here and there. The more relevant they get, the cheaper they get, which keeps them in the conversation for upgrading old systems to get better performance. But man, Xeon naming can be a pain to figure out. Is a W Xeon better than an X Xeon? Is an E5 better than an E3? What is this about V2 and V3? Do I have the right motherboard for a Xeon? Can Xeon even play games? My name is Chris, this is Coalition Gaming, and today I'll be your computer technician. To me, Xeons got popularized on YouTube originally back around 2016 by Brian from Tech Yes City. He hasn't been the only creator to show off the power and value of Xeons, but he's just the first one that comes to mind for me. This set me off on my own adventure in Xeons, and one of the biggest things I learned about that was an early struggle, was the naming of Xeon CPUs. It could get kind of weird. Now, Intel seems to constantly change the naming structure of Xeons, and I myself am totally lost on anything from Skylake till now pretty much. But that's fine, since the Xeons worth using pretty much fall between Westmere and Haswell EP, or as more people might know, between 1st Gen Core i series and 4th Gen Core i series. Sorry, Broadwell, not a lot of people use you for Xeon stuff like this. 1st Gen for Intel's HEDT platform was on socket 1366 using the X58 platform. I've done plenty of builds on this platform using both consumer boards from companies like EVGA and OEM boards from companies like HP. 2 Xeons are available that are factory unlocked for overclocking also, and that is those are the Xeon W3690 and W3680. These are also awesome since they are 6-core, 12-thread CPUs. Worthwhile Xeons for this generation appear with both a W and an X. Both letters denote a high-power performance model. Also, W is for single-socket solutions, and X supports multi-socket configurations, or dual-socket configs in that case. They can both be used in single-socket configs though, and the Xeon X5650 and X5675 were both popular budget choices for overclocking, and even though these are locked, this platform supported base clock overclocking on the enthusiast boards, and that hasn't been a thing in a long time because Intel changed the way that stuff sort of worked. Another one on this platform worth mentioning if you want high core clocks on a locked platform like an HP Z400 is the Xeon X5687, which has a turbo of up to 3.9 GHz and an all-core of 3.6. It is only a 4-core 8-thread though, but yeah. After that, the naming gets easier to understand. Intel switched their naming scheme to reflect different performance segments, different architecture versions, and different multi-CPU support configurations. The first one that pops up to me is the Xeon E3-1241. E3 means it's an entry-level and mainstream performance segment. The first one denotes it can be only used in a 1 CPU config. The second digit denotes the socket type, and the last 2 numbers denote a general performance identifier. The higher that number, or rather the higher the last 2 numbers, the faster the clock speed, usually. Xeon E3s and E5s are the most commonly used by people reusing Xeons for budget gaming, streaming, and workstation PCs. So if you happen to be considering a Xeon upgrade because you have an old PC lying around, look for a specific Xeon that matches the architecture of the CPU it already has. This is where the V number becomes important in Xeon naming. If it's an E3 or E5 but has no V at the end, this means Sandy Bridge or 2nd Gen. This was the first time they started doing that, and thus no V anything at the end. If it's a V2, that means Ivy Bridge or 3rd Gen equivalent, the second time they did this. If it's V3, that means Haswell or 4th Gen equivalent. If it's V4, that means Broadwell or 5th Gen equivalent. E3 CPUs are usually interchangeable with consumer socket 11.5X motherboards, something you might see a run-of-the-mill i3, i5, or i7 on in some old Dell, Lenovo, or HP office computers. However, E5 CPUs are generally on the high-end Intel platform, which would be socket 2011 for the range of Xeons I'm talking about in this video. But you have to be careful to make sure you use an X79 motherboard if going with a no V or V2 Xeon. V3 and V4 use the X99 chipset, which also switches over to DDR4, so be aware of that. What I do when looking for the best Xeon for the least money is simply check Wikipedia. Looking up Intel Xeons there, starting at Nihilum-based Xeons, you can scroll around and see organized data on clock speeds and core counts for the various Xeons of different architectures. When you see one you like, just hop on over to eBay and search it there. If it's too expensive, it's either one of the rare Xeon models, like an E5 1680 V3, which makes it expensive, or something crazier. Unicorn Xeons do exist out there. Anybody who's a big follower of Xeons can tell you. Drop the last two numbers lower, like searching E5 1650 instead, and you'll see the price drop massively. Cross-check with CPU World or Wiki to verify clocks and core counts, and there you go. Nowadays, I see lots of people wanting to upgrade old office PCs or old gaming systems with old i5s from 2nd gen to 4th gen, and cheap 4-core 8-thread Xeons like the E3-1270 are the perfect fit. Nowadays, channels like Craft Computing have popularized the use of the socket 2011 Xeons in both single and dual CPU socket configs using cheap Chinese motherboards. I say cheap in quotes because sometimes these motherboards cost the same, if not more, than motherboards for Ryzen CPUs. DDR4 is cheap and B450 motherboards are as well, so it's hard to recommend a funky Xeon config nowadays unless you really can't afford the price of the Ryzen CPU that you want. Another advantage of compromising by going with a lower core count Ryzen setup is that you have a really good upgrade path. You may also be able to find cheap 2nd gen Ryzen setups on the secondhand market, which are absolutely worthwhile if the price is right, and that would be a minimal compromise while maintaining an upgrade path. With one of these Xeon configs, once you pick the one that you want, that's the end of the road. So keep that in mind. Either way, you'll get better performance than you expect, so it's hard to go wrong still. My favorite cheap 4-core 8-thread Xeon for the regular consumer socket 11.5X boards is the E3-1241 of appropriate generation for the board that you'd be looking to use. And these go anywhere between $35 to $70 on eBay. Recently, the E3-1270 with higher clocks have come down in price to that same range, so that's my new favorite. For the high-end desktop socket 2011s, my favorite for the X79 chipset is the Xeon E5 2667 V2 8-core 16-thread CPU because it has lots of cores and great clock speeds with the 4 GHz max single-core turbo to 3.6 GHz all-core, all for around $60 on eBay. For the X99 chipset, also for around $60, my favorite is the E5 1650 V3, which is a 6-core 12-thread CPU with a 3.7 GHz max turbo and a 3.6 GHz all-core. Bonus on this one is that its multiplier is unlocked like a K-series Intel CPU, so if you have the right motherboard, you can easily get these to 4.5 GHz all-core with a decent cooler, of course. If you need the extra cores though, the E5 2667 V3 8-core is a great option, but it got nerfed a little bit on the clock speeds compared to the V2 Ivy Ridge version, and it costs a little more at around $90 on eBay. If you want to talk more Xeons, I stream every Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific, so feel free to stop by, drop a follow, and let's talk some tech. I'll leave links in the description with more Xeon info, as well as a playlist of my own Xeon builds with benchmarks and everything. You guys can see how well they do. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and that bell so you don't miss a single upload. Peace out for now, everybody. Bye. We got more content right over there. Tons of stuff. Click some stuff, everybody. Happy New Year. Thanks for watching this video. And hope you all have a good 2022. And click one.